Please welcome this evening's candidates. For the Scottish Conservative and Unionist Party, we've got Gary Mulvaney. For the Liberal Democrats, we have Alan Reid. We have Michael Kelly of the Scottish Labour Party. And for the SNP, we have Brendan O'Hara. That's good. No booing. Cheering's fine. Yeah, no booing tonight. Now, can I ask you all please to adhere to the rules this evening when putting questions to our candidates? The rules for this hustings have been set out by tonight's host, the Dunoon Observer newspaper, and they are as follows. Audience members must also be courteous to each other tonight. As I said, no booing of candidates will be accepted, and no questions that are devolved solely for the Scottish Parliament. So this includes some of the questions about the Dunoon ferry services. Not all, but some of them. Just please bear that in mind tonight. We also have a selection of questions to put to our candidates from the editor of the Dunoon Observer newspaper. I'll put those questions to the candidates throughout tonight. But time is against us as always, so all the candidates will be given a maximum of 2 minutes to address each issue that you raise. You might choose to do it in less than 2 minutes, which is fine, but we'll endeavour to have all candidates sticking to the 2-minute window. So without any further ado, let's get acquainted with each of our candidates tonight. And to start off with, Gary Mulvaney. Tell us about you. Your 2 minutes start now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Hopefully you can all hear me. It's good to be back in this particular hall. I was here in 2010 at the previous election, and it wasn't in such a nice state of repair. Elections are all about choices, and you've got 4 candidates here tonight to make a choice about. It's also a choice about, the particular party, the particular policies, your interests as well. Hopefully I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a motor dealer based in Helensburgh. I've been on the council now for the last 14 years. I'm passionate about business. I'm very, very interested in business and finance, and I do hope to bring some of that to the post if I do get elected as your Member of Parliament. I want to be, as your Member of Parliament, a local champion. I'm not there to be the man that's down in Westminster, London all the time. I'm there to achieve things for this constituency. But this election is much more than about what's here tonight. It's about a choice of who you want as your government. It's about whether you want Theresa May to continue as your Prime Minister or whether you want Jeremy Corbyn. And just thinking about that choice, one of the most important decisions after the election, it happens 11 days after, and that's the Brexit negotiations. They start really in earnest just shortly after the election is announced. So you really need to think about who you want to represent the United Kingdom in those negotiations. So I would ask you to think very, very carefully. There's also one other question. It's not on the ballot paper, and it's about independence referendum number 2. We've heard it ever since we actually decided back in 2014 that we wanted to be part of the UK, but Nicola Sturgeon and our party have very much firmly put that on the agenda again. So if you want to say no to Indy Ref 2, you want to make your voice clear, then vote Conservative on May.
Thank you very much. Now let's hear from Michael Kelly of the Scottish Labour Party.
Well, hello there. I haven't actually worked at the highest levels of my job. I work in a co-op in Tarbert. I'm just a shop worker, and I've never been anything more, I guess. I'm here because fundamentally our economy isn't working and our services are failing as a result of that. Our prices are going up, and believe me, I know, I hear that every day from people complaining. And, our wages however, are stagnant. What growth we've had has come from people being pushed into low-paid, low-productivity jobs. And now we have, as he says, we have Brexit to negotiate on top of this. Frankly, the old ways of working are not working. To combat this, we need to combat this new era of uncertainty. We need to do it with a new vision for society. We need a higher minimum wage. We need nationalisation of the monopolies like the rail, the post and the power companies. We need a national investment bank to fund the rebuilding of our economy where the private sector isn't failing. We must force banks to keep retail and investment banking separate so we don't have people losing all their money because banks have frittered it away on poor investment choices. We must triple lock pensions so that people can rely on these pensions in their old age. Above all, we need to overhaul the tax system so that the richest in society pay the fair share that they should. For too long, we have allowed our economy to run out of control. We need a new economy for the many and not the few. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's Michael Kelly of the Scottish Labour Party. Now, let's hear from the Liberal Democrats and Alan Reid.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you all very much for coming out this evening, and thank you to the Dunoon Observer for organising the hustings tonight, and in particular thanks to all the volunteers who have worked for so many years on the Burgh Hall to produce such a magnificent venue for tonight. It's great to be back here. I'm one of two former MPs who are among the candidates list that you have before you. I was the Member of Parliament representing Argyll and Bute at Westminster for 14 years. There are two very important aspects to the job. One is representing the constituents down at Westminster, and when I was at Westminster, I focused entirely on representing Argyll and Bute there. But there's another important aspect to the job, and that is back here in the constituency. As you all know, Argyll and Bute is a very widespread constituency, and I made it an important part of my job to get regularly out and about in the constituency, meeting individuals, meeting community groups. I made sure that I held at least one surgery in every village every year, meaning that I held over 100 surgeries every year. I think that contact is very important. For this election, I want the country to concentrate on creating jobs and improving our public services. We can't be distracted by a second independence referendum. That would be disastrous for the economy. It would also be extremely divisive. We have to put that behind us and concentrate on the job in hand. As far as Brexit is concerned, I want to see what's called a soft Brexit. That is, we stay in the single market and we stay in the customs union. And I ask you for your support to serve another term in Parliament.
Thank you very much, Alan Reid. And finally, before we get things underway, let's hear from Brendan O'Hara of the SNP.
Thank you, Chair. Over the last 2 years, I have made the economic regeneration of this constituency through physical and digital connectivity my #1 priority. And if re-elected, I intend that continuing to be my #1 priority. And I believe that nowhere in this constituency is that more pressing and more urgent than here in Cowal and Dunoon. Because without reliable broadband and without reliable transport links, we can't possibly hope to keep our young, ambitious people in this community while attracting other young, ambitious people who want to live, work and raise a family in what is essentially one of the clearest environments you will find anywhere in the country. We can't attract them here unless we have broadband and transport links. Tonight, I'm here, but I should have been about 300 miles north of here in the Faroe Islands, because what I've discovered in the last couple of years is that the Faroe Islands, which has a geography and a topography very similar to Argyll and Bute, every single house is connected to 4G, and every single island is connected by an undersea tunnel. And there's absolutely no reason why, if the Faroe Islands can do it, that we cannot have that in Argyll and Bute. It's a matter of political choice. The other big issue that the other candidates have talked about, and will come up tonight, I'm sure, is Brexit. It is absolutely essential that Scotland's voice is heard at that negotiating table. Scotland voted to remain, and our voice has to be heard. And with a vote for the SNP on June the 8th as a vote to have Scotland's voice heard at the Brexit negotiating table and to keep the hard work going across Argyll and Bute to connect our communities both physically and digitally into what remains of the 21st century.
Thank you very much. Brendan O'Hara there of the SNP. Now, before we take some questions from the floor, as I said earlier, we have questions tonight directly from the editor of our local print news media, the Dunoon Observer. So I'm going to ask each of the candidates a question from the editor, then we'll be ready to take some questions from the floor. And we'll start off tonight with Michael Kelly from Labour. Now, Michael, 8 weeks ago, Jeremy Corbyn said he would not stand in the way of a Scottish independence referendum. Just last week, he said he would now block a Scottish independence referendum. What's changed his mind?
I think he's seen sense, frankly.
Is that all you want to say?
I'm not really sure there's much else to say about it.
So you believe that he knows better than all those people who live in this country who voted they did want to leave? Are you saying he knows best?
No, I'm saying that it's his job to decide whether, he decides whether we vote in favour of it.
Let's change it slightly. What's your opinion on it?
I think we absolutely will not get an independence referendum.
So you're in agreement with Jeremy then, yes?
Absolutely.
We just thought we'd ask. Thank you very much. That's Michael Kelly from Labour. Now, Gary Mulvaney for the Conservative Party. Is U-turning on a major manifesto policy a sign of a strong and stable leadership?
Sounds a bit like a loaded question to me. But I think one of the things that politicians too easily get criticised for is being out of touch, and they come to policy decisions and they don't listen to what the people want. Now, quite clearly, the policy that I think you may be referring to is actually a reserved matter anyway. But quite clearly, there needed to be clarification on the policy, and the Prime Minister provided clarification on the policy. To me, that sounds like listening. When people come out with various things and there's a reaction, then the natural thing is you either ignore the people or you listen to the people. Theresa May listened to the people, and she did the right thing.
Thank you very much, Gary. As I said, these are questions from the editor of our local newspaper, the Dunoon Observer. Moving on to Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. Now, Brendan, in 2014, the people of Scotland said no to Scottish independence. Now, what part of no does the SNP not understand?
I think that what's absolutely vital that one recognises here is that the United Kingdom that Scotland voted to remain part of in 2014 no longer exists. We voted to remain part of a United Kingdom that was committed to remaining part of the European Union, and indeed a huge part of that campaign to keep Scotland within the United Kingdom was that we would lose our EU membership and therefore our EU citizenship. So it's not a case of not saying or not hearing the word no. And let's be absolutely clear that in 2016 the Scottish National Party said that in the material circumstances in which Scotland is taken out of the European Union against its will, we would seek a second referendum. So it is entirely fair, entirely legitimate, and the Scottish National Party and the Scottish Government have a mandate to hold a second referendum, because that's what we stood on. And unlike Theresa May, we didn't just get all weak and wobbly and change our manifesto. We stuck to our manifesto commitment, and the people said that is what they backed. So we have a mandate to hold a second referendum after we know what disaster is going to befall us with Brexit.
And as I said, don't worry, you'll get a chance to put your questions in just a moment. Final question just now, though, from the editor of the Dunoon Observer for Alan Reid for the LibDems. Now, in Westminster, you joined a coalition with the Tories. Now, in Argyll and Bute Council, you've joined a coalition with the Tories. Is it a case of vote Reid, get Tory?
No, definitely not at all. We joined a coalition with the Tories at Westminster in, which, if you think back to 2010, was very difficult economic circumstances. And we got Liberal Democrat policies through that coalition, which would not have happened otherwise. Just take, for example, the triple lock guarantee for pensioners. That gave pensioners a guaranteed income, a guaranteed increase every year of either whichever was the higher of the rise in income, the rise in prices, or 2.5%. That was achieved because of Liberal Democrats in government. And now we see from the Tory manifesto, now that we are out of government and they're hoping to govern on their own, if the Tories are governing on their own, that triple lock guarantee is going to be scrapped. That just shows that it wasn't a Tory government, it was a coalition government, and we got good Liberal Democrat policies through. Now, on the council, there's a coalition between ourselves, the Conservatives, and Independents. Now, all 21 councillors in that coalition are all in the coalition and able to take their own decisions and what they think is best for Argyll and Bute. We did not enter into a coalition with the SNP because past experience has shown that the SNP councillors aren't able to take their own decisions, but they have to refer to Holyrood. Because a few years ago, a coalition was agreed at local level between SNP, Tory and Liberal Democrat councillors, but the SNP councillors said, well, wait a minute, we've agreed this, but we still have to refer this to Holyrood. And after waiting a while back came the order, no, you can't do that. So that is why we've entered into the coalition with the Conservatives and the Independents, because it's 21 councillors who will make their own decisions and won't need to refer anything back up to party headquarters all the time.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you. So that's the first set of questions from the editor of the Dunoon Observer, but now it's your turn. As I said, try and bear in mind those rules that we spoke of earlier. If you want to ask a question, please raise your hand and we will get through you one by one. We do have someone with a microphone here as well, so once you've raised your hand and I point to you, please give him time to come over and get the microphone set up before you ask your question. The reason for that being we're also broadcasting this live and we'd like to hear what you have to say. And if in particular you have a candidate that you wish to address that question to, please make me aware of that as well. This gentleman at the front with a notepad, you had your hand up first. If we could have a mic for this gentleman here, please, and if you'd like to, nice and clearly, ask your question.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Okay, Gordon East Senior, Mr Chairman. In all probability, when the House of Commons resits, there will be a vote at some time on the subject of fox hunting. Bearing in mind it's a free vote, you don't have to appease your party leader, or you don't have to appease your whips. How would our prospective MP vote on this matter? Yes for fox hunting or no for fox hunting?
Okay, it's quite an easy one to answer then. Okay, I'll come to Gary Mulvaney, Conservative Party, on that first of all. Fox hunting, yes or no?
Okay, I mean, in simple terms, I'm not in favour of fox hunting if the legislation came before Parliament. Whether it was a free vote or even, in fact, if it was a party whip vote, I would not support the repeal of the fox hunting bill.
Thank you very much. That's short, sharp answer for you there. Michael Kelly of Labour, how would you vote on this?
I'm fine with the legislation as it is at present. I'm fine with the ban remaining in place.
Okay, and if it came to vote, it's no from you as well, that's what you're saying. Yes, okay, thank you very much. And Brendan from SNP, Brendan O'Hara.
I think it's interesting that the Tories seem to be putting fox hunting and a ban, or lifting the ban on ivory trade as two of their top priorities ahead of alleviating child poverty. And it's interesting as well that in 2015 they tried to bring this back in, and it was only the SNP that stopped them doing it. Had the SNP, as they expected us to do, because it is a matter reserved, or doesn't affect Scotland, they expect us to sit in our hands, and we didn't, and we said that we wouldn't. That's the only reason that they didn't bring the repeal in then. So we would do exactly the same now as we did then, and we would vote against any fox hunting, the lifting of any fox hunting ban.
Thank you very much. And finally, for the moment, for the LibDems, Alan Reid, how do you answer that question?
Well, I would vote no to any bill to repeal fox hunting. That is that I would want the ban to stay.
So there you go. You've got your 4 no's by the looks of things, and hopefully that was the answer you were looking for. If you'd like to raise your hand again, sorry, we'll get you. Now, for want of a better description, the gentleman in the beard sitting there with the jumper, if you just wait until our microphone gets you, had your hand in the air quite early before we took the first question. And if it's for any particular candidate, please point them out to us.
Yeah, this is for everybody bar Brendan, actually. The ones that keep talking about independence. With 69 seats, more seats than the 3 other parties combined represented tonight, the SNP emphatically won the 2016 Scottish election. The SNP, having won the election, gave a manifesto pledge to hold another independence referendum if Scotland was dragged out of the European Union against her will. My question is this: do Lib Dems, Tories and Labour believe manifesto pledges not to be worth the paper they're written on?
So there you go. Quite an easy question, I suppose, for you. So Michael, I'll come to you first from the Labour Party.
You shouldn't promise things you can't deliver. And they have done that with this. It's not going to happen.
Okay, so there's your answer for Michael. Gary Mulvaney from the Conservatives. It's about manifesto pledges.
Well, I think let's go to the root of the question. The question is about whether we should have a second independence referendum. The answer is very clearly no. We had one in 2014. That was a once-in-a-generation referendum described by your leader, Nicola Sturgeon. Once in a generation, 2.5 years since then. Every single week she's asked a question about a referendum. Theresa May has made the point quite clear. Now is not the time.
If you hold on, we'll get a mic back to you as well, because I know you were trying to say something during that as well. Because I've got a funny feeling this might not be the first time this question comes up. Yeah, you were saying something there at the end of that, sorry?
No, I'm just saying it was a manifesto pledge. Are you asking Nicola Sturgeon to break that manifesto pledge, to hold another referendum? Dead simple.
So, okay, in fairness, we can't ask another question, but yeah, I get your point. Alan Reid, the breaking of manifesto pledges, you heard what he has to say.
Well, the SNP have every right to argue in favour of an independence referendum if that's what they want. Equally, the rest of us have every right to argue against that going ahead. I am against a second independence referendum because it would cause great division in Scotland. It would be bad for our economy. An extra 2 years of debating independence means that for those 2 years business is not going to invest. So I have every right to take an opposite point of view, and I have every right to put my views to the electorate, and if you elect me to Westminster, my pledge is to vote against a second independence referendum.
Okay, and just in fairness, in right to reply, I will actually ask Brendan O'Hara, just very quickly, please.
I find myself agreeing with a lot of what Alan said. I think that Alan has absolutely the right to put his case to the electorate. I believe that every political party at this table has the right to put that case to the electorate. But the way things are decided in this country is that that's what we do. We put our manifesto commitments, our promises in front of the electorate, and the winner gets to implement their manifesto. So what you're saying, gentlemen, is that a straw poll of public opinion, a straw poll decided by yourselves is enough to override the democratically expressed will of the Scottish people in the 2016 Scottish parliamentary elections. It's fundamentally anti-democratic. I think you should think on before you pursue it.
Okay, you heard what the four candidates have to say about manifesto pledges. Now, the lady there who had her hand up, who was rolling her eyes quite a lot during that, we're going to come to you just now, because I know you've got a question. Again, if it's for a particular candidate, please, but I will obviously allow all candidates to reply if they feel the need.
It's for Brendan.
Okay, so you can hold the mic nice and close to your mouth.
Right, we had the referendum, the Scottish referendum. We know for a fact that it was told once in a generation, once in a lifetime. They can put it in their manifesto 2 years later. But when they did that last referendum, they signed an Edinburgh Agreement. Will there be another Edinburgh Agreement? And what can we put in it to stop this happening again when it fails again? It will be a no vote again. Well, what can we put in that to stop it?
I do have to stop you there, because this is about a Westminster election, and unless it's got, I understand Brexit is a big part of this as well. I'm going to allow the candidates all to answer this, but please bear in mind this is more about the Westminster election in relation to Brexit, etc., but nothing that the Scottish Parliament can decide on its own. So, gentlemen, do you want me to allow Brendan to answer that question? Brendan, sorry.
Okay, I mean, this idea that this once in a generation, I mean, I know Alex Salmond's a very popular man and a very powerful figure in some areas, but I don't think that a line from Alex Salmond tends to override actually, it wasn't. If you did your homework, it was Alec that said it. So Alex Salmond saying that does not put the kibosh on the will of the people. Now, if the will of the people is that we want a second referendum, then that should be enacted. Now, if the people then say that they don't want a second referendum, then that should be enacted also. But what we have is the SNP went to the people a year ago and we received a mandate to hold a referendum. And not only did we receive a mandate, we specified the circumstances in which it would happen. So unless you say that Alex Salmond and what he says overrides everything else and every other word from the Scottish people, then you are denying democracy.
Okay. Tell you what, I'm going to come to Gary Mulvaney in just a moment, but first of all, Michael Kelly, this seems to be exactly what you're saying.
Sorry?
This seems to be exactly what you're saying. No to another independence referendum. This is what this lady's referring to, yes?
Well, I mean, I have to say that, you know, if you ask people a straw poll, then a lot of people are going to say bring back hanging, and yet it doesn't happen. And none of the parties are saying that either. Just because you say people want that, it's not going to happen.
Just thought I'd let you give it, because it was something you were quite strongly, you mentioned quite strongly earlier on. Now, Gary Mulvaney, obviously, while Brenda was talking there, you've got a lot to say about this.
Well, I mean, in a sense, I mean, how often do we need to go around this particular round? Is it best out of 3 for the SNP, best out of 5 for the SNP? Do we have it? Well, we have it now as often as the people want, as often as the SNP want in reality. We had a referendum in 2014. We came to a decision. It was a very, very decisive decision, and yet the SNP cannot move on from that to today. And the point is, they got a manifesto. They had a manifesto in 2016. It spoke about education. It spoke about health. But by God, they've been banging on about independence ever since, and it's time to get on with the day job.
Alan Reid, for the Liberal Democrats, what do you make of all this?
Well, Alex Salmond, as First Minister of Scotland, signed the Edinburgh Agreement. And part of the Edinburgh Agreement was that both the UK government and the Scottish government agreed they would implement the result of the 2014 referendum. If the 2014 referendum had resulted in a yes vote, the UK government would have cooperated with the Scottish government in setting up Scotland as an independent state. The outcome was a no vote, and committed to by his signature on the Edinburgh Agreement, Alex Salmond committed the Scottish Government to working with the UK Government to implement a continuation of Scotland within the United Kingdom, and that involved the devolution of further expansive powers as agreed by the Smith Commission. So Alex Salmond agreed to implement the outcome. The outcome was a no vote, and the Smith Commission and more powers, which have all been delivered or are in the process of being delivered by the UK Government. And Alex Salmond at the same time said once in a generation. Well, by my calculations, that takes us to about 2044.
There you go. So that's Alan Reid's opinion on it. So now, before this turns into ping pong and it's backwards and forwards all night on the same question, I'm looking just now for someone who has a question that doesn't pertain to this particular point, and it pertains to Westminster and the elections that we have on for Westminster. We will probably revisit the other question before the end of tonight, but if you've got a question, there's someone who's actually waving there. They've been waving their hand for a couple of minutes, and they just give me the thumbs up. I can't even see your face. I'm going to trust them, going to come to you. Going to have a question from the back of the Burgh Hall tonight. If you want to stand up so we can see you, and if it's, again, for a specific candidate, please make that clear.
Yes, this is specific questions for Councillor Mulvaney. Apart from not doing the day job at the minute, last week you were on BBC, and I believe I heard it correctly, but that you quoted that you would trust Theresa May's judgment if she decided to launch a first strike nuclear attack. Given that within the 48 hours she's already done such an embarrassing U-turn on the manifesto pledge about social care for the elderly, possibly because her husband has a direct involvement in actually the market in that area, does Mr Mulvaney still have such childlike faith in Mrs May's judgment to launch a first strike nuclear attack?
Okay. Before you answer, there's a lot in there, including the personal comment as well, but let's talk about the first strike part of that, because that seems to be the main part of that question. Gary Mulvaney for the Conservatives, how do you answer?
I think, first of all, the comment about Mr May is very much below the belt, and I don't think we should be bringing anybody's personal life into it, in fairness. I think that's disrespectful. In terms of the question, you know, you've got two potential Prime Ministers that will be in charge of the independent deterrent. One is Jeremy Corbyn and one is Theresa May. My faith is with Theresa May to do whatever is necessary in the UK national interest, and I won't change my mind on that.
Okay, right. Okay, so you So if you could just give us a second, we can't hear you with that mic, you see, so if you give the candidates a chance to answer first. So you mentioned Jeremy Corbyn there. So Michael Kelly of Labour, the choice is between Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn isn't going to end the world, which, you know, it's quite a big plus point in his favour, I would say. I mean, obviously I don't think she's going to launch a nuclear first strike, but... Well, no, it's Jeremy, like, this is completely silly. I get what you're saying about it was kind of a silly comment, but no one's going to be launching any nuclear strikes on anyone anytime soon.
Okay,
You can be quite safe there.
Alan Reid of, excuse me everyone, Alan Reid of the Liberal Democrats, where do you stand on this issue, what Theresa May say, and also what Jeremy Corbyn says? See, because you'll be stuck somewhere in the middle, won't you? Because
No.
you'll have to agree or disagree with one or the other, surely. So what would it be?
Oh, well, we've made it clear that we regard both the Conservative and Labour parties as so off the wall that we wouldn't enter into a coalition with either of them.
So this time round, completely different, yes.
Oh, yes, I mean, David Cameron was a Prime Minister who had a much more moderate view of the world than Theresa May. Theresa May is far off the wall compared to David Cameron. We were prepared to enter into a coalition with David Cameron, but certainly not with the present Conservative Party.
Okay, so Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. Obviously, you've got a different view on this completely, yeah.
No, absolutely. I mean, there is no economic, military or moral argument for any country possessing nuclear weapons. It's particularly the United Kingdom. I mean, £200,000 million its lifetime costs. It's a cost which the United Kingdom simply cannot afford. If you even remove the moral argument from it, it's a cost that the United Kingdom cannot afford. But to then suggest that you have this faith in Theresa May's judgment to essentially end the world or not end the world, I find absolutely astonishing. A first strike nuclear attack would be the end of civilization. And my God, I wouldn't trust Theresa May to keep Wayne sort of close, let alone end the world.
There you go. So there you are. If you hold on a second, I'll get to you, madam, in just a second. But the chap at the back with the white hair, white beard, if you'd like to put your question.
Theresa May, prior to being Prime Minister, was the Home Secretary. She was in charge of the defence of this country, and past events have shown she miserably failed. In the cyber attack, which very near disrupted the health service, and unfortunately, the horrendous attack in Manchester last week. She should not be considering resigning rather than continue to stand as Prime Minister, and the question is for the Conservative person, because she has shown in the past week she can't be trusted on her judgment. She keeps changing her mind when she's under pressure.
Okay, obviously on on the subject, before the Conservative candidate, and so on the subject of the horrific attacks in Manchester, obviously that, I don't believe personally that's something that any one person in government could probably be held responsible for. But on the question of the NHS underfunding in IT, which is what caused the cyber attack, Gary Mulvaney, it's underfunded. It's quite clear that that's what went wrong.
Well, I think to come to the second part of the question, I think it says a lot about you, sir, by asking that question about Theresa May and equating it to last week. That says exactly how you view the world. In terms of the point about the NHS and cyber attacks, cyber attacks are a part of our world. They affect many businesses, both in the public and private sector. And it wasn't just the NHS that was taken down last week. There was a number of motor companies I'm aware of were taken down as well. So it is something that is a very difficult problem for any environment, any individual company or organisation to deal with. And I think it's difficult to pinpoint the blame at Theresa May or the Conservative government. There's more money in the NHS than there's ever been, and I'm sure there's more money in the IT budget than there's ever been in terms of trying to protect against cyber attacks. But these are a fact of life. and all we can do is try and do our best. So, I mean, I would say that, you know, every organisation will face up to cyber attacks, and we've just got to do our best in terms of some of the systems and some of the processes. I don't think it's an easy answer.
Okay. Alan Reid, NHS funding fine, not a problem, apparently. So,
Well, there has clearly been gross mismanagement within the NHS in both England and Scotland. I mean, the problem was that they were using an outdated operating system. And that is unforgivable, because the outdated operating system was known to be vulnerable to cyber attack. So it's been gross mismanagement in the NHS in both England and Scotland, and that's got to be, urgent attention has got to be given to that, to upgrade the operating systems so that they are robust and up to date and able to stand up to cyber attacks. Because organisations that had upgraded their IT systems avoided that cyber attack, so it was avoidable.
okay, thank you very much. Michael Kelly, obviously the NHS, strong topic for your party.
Yes,
Partly the funding's fine.
Well, I'm not sure how to dignify that with an answer. Frankly, I mean, Alan brought up this being, you know, about software not being, new systems not being implemented, but we're actually talking like patches not being implemented. Like, this is stuff that companies are doing and providing, and we're not actually using our own services, so I don't understand what's going on there. What I would also bring up is, as part of Brexit and the hard Brexit that May has gone for, we are also exiting a whole bunch of European agencies like Europol, which are dedicated to cybercrime and such, for, you know, on a European scale. And I don't think anyone who voted for Brexit particularly cared about whether we're involved with Europol and whether, you know, that we cooperate with other European countries on cybercrime. So I think it brings up sort of wider problems with the Brexit process as well. Okay,
and Brendan O'Hara, you spoke about connectivity at the start of this tonight, and we do live in 2017. Cyber attacks are becoming commonplace nowadays as well, but to allow something like that to happen in the NHS with 7-year-old operating systems, and what would the SNP do differently?
I think it's worth making the point from the start that this SNP government has put record funding into the Scottish National Health Service. It's not that the chronic underfunding that we're seeing in the rest of the United Kingdom. But if I could go back to the question for a moment, because I think it's a really interesting and worthwhile question. And I would refer you, I don't know if you saw, there was a really interesting article this morning in either The Guardian or The Independent, which looked at the relationship between the UK security services and so many of these rebel groups, you know, whether it's the groups that were fighting Gaddafi or the groups that were fighting Saddam Hussein. And there is an element, and it's worth having a look at, there's an element there's been far too, you know, my enemy's enemy is my friend, and we've taken our eye off a lot of people who are, no, one should not take one's eye off of. And I think that if you haven't seen it, it's worth having a look at. I mean, I'm not going to, you know, say that, you know, the UK security forces were in any way responsible for what happened in Manchester, but it's an interesting new dimension to it, and I think it's worth having a look at. What I would say to Gary is that cyber attacks like this are not a fact of life. They're only a fact of life if you chronically underfund your defence and security, and that's what's happening. And you're chronically underfunding defence and security because you have ring-fenced Trident. You have ring-fenced being a nuclear power at the expense of everything else. And therefore you leave yourself wide open. And so therefore you have a 7-year-old system because you cannot afford to upgrade it. And that's what happens. These are the direct consequences of having an obsession with a weapon system you cannot afford because you leave your back door wide open.
I'm almost certain that the question on Trident will come up again tonight, so don't worry, we'll give all the candidates a chance to answer, and have a think about it yourself. You've got a question in particular about Trident. Now, we are going to ask some more questions to our panel from the editor of the Dunoon Observer newspaper, but before we do that, I'm going to take one more question from the floor. The gentleman over there, I will get to you in our next round of questions, okay? But before that, there's been a lady who's been straining her arm for about the past 10 minutes to try and get my attention, and if I don't let her ask a question, I think our eyes will burn a hole in me tonight. Now, if it's for a particular candidate, again, please make us aware of that. But we're going to try and let everyone answer if we possibly
My
can.
question's a general question for all the candidates. What would the candidates do to support WASPy women? And if you're not sure what that is, that's the women who were born in the 1950s and have been adversely affected by the Tory changes to pension law.
Okay, thank you. Right. Michael Kelly, Scottish Labour Party, WASPy women.
You know, I have to confess, I personally don't know a great deal about it. Although I do know that Jackie Bailey, the MSP, has been highly engaged with it. So, I mean, I think, as I understand it, changes the pension age, and not think, you know, we talked earlier about triple locking pensions, and that's important. And I think also changes that people are not aware of to pensions are, you know, we need to deal with these, and we can't allow them to sit like that.
Okay, thank you, Michael Kelly. Alan Reid for the LibDems, the WASPy women, I'm sure you're aware of them and the effect this is having on them.
Yes, I was at the public meeting in Rothesay on Saturday, and I signed the pledge to support WASPy women in the next Parliament if I'm elected as the Member of Parliament. And it's true that pension ages have to go up because we're all living longer, healthier lives, and it's true that we have to equalise the pension age of men and women. But the present programme of upping the pension age and equalisation is going far too quickly, and it should be progressed at a slower rate. Because the women who are affected were, successive governments failed to inform the women who are affected of the plans for equalisation, and that means that they were not given the opportunity to make the preparations for their retirement that they would have made had they been aware of it. When I was a Member of Parliament before, I did raise this issue several times in Parliament. I raised it twice at Prime Minister's question time, urging the Prime Minister to slow down the rate at which the pension age for women was being increased. I got the usual bland replies about he would think about it and he would consider it, and there would be transition measures, but none of that came to pass. So I did try the last time, but I'm certainly willing to try yet again in the next Parliament. And I think what's different this time is that there's a strong campaign group, the WASPy campaign group, whereas back several years ago when this was debated before, because the government didn't publicise the issue, it meant that people were not aware of the issue, and so the campaign group hadn't been formed at that time. So I think the next time, next Parliament, there will be a strong campaign group, WASPy, behind us then. I would certainly, if elected, make every effort to support the group and to slow down the speed at which the pension age is being increased for women.
Thank you very much, Alan Reid. Now, let's move on to Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. The WASPy Women campaign. Is it something you're aware of?
Aware of? I'm a founder member of Argyll and Bute WASPy. Despite my gender, I was invited along, and I was involved in day one. What WASPy have done is absolutely outstanding. It shows how a group of women can get together and say, this is wrong. And they were picked on. They were picked on specifically by a government who didn't believe they had the capability to organise and fight back. And they have done so staggeringly well, and I congratulate them for it. WASPy, what they have done, let's be absolutely clear. Pensions are not a benefit. Pensions are a contract that you enter into, a contract between you and the government. Now, if a private pension company had done this, they would have been hauled in front of the court. It would not have been legal. But this is legalised robbery. The government are robbing the women born in the 50s blind, and they're causing untold hardship. And I think they're causing a logjam within the workplace as well, because women who are entitled to retire, who are entitled to their pension, are being forced to work longer. And there are only a finite number of jobs available. So women either have to spend all of their savings, they have to continue working, therefore not having that sort of natural move on in the jobs market, and it's causing untold harm, untold misery and deep social consequences. I will continue, as I have done on numerous occasions in the last 2 years, to speak in Parliament, to attend the rallies and to do whatever I can in order to break this logjam, because the government know that this is wrong.
Okay, Brendan,
they are absolutely clear that this is wrong.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there on that, Brendan. So, misery, harm, working longer. This is your party that our audience member is referring to, Gary Mulvaney. I thought we'd come to you last, though. If you could specifically answer the question that our member of the audience put.
Well, I'm certainly quite happy to pick up the issue and look into the issues that are raised in terms of WASPI. I don't believe that any government, whatever political persuasion they are, go out to as Brendan would describe, to pick on anybody. But clearly, pensions is a very difficult and complex issue. We are living longer. That's a fact of life. Social care is increasing as well, and clearly, there's a group of women who have been particularly affected by this, in terms of national contributions into the pot and not being able to recognise. So I'm quite happy to pick up the issue and have a look at it, because I do recognise that there are sort of genuine concerns out there. But I'm certainly not going to categorically state, without having looked into what my position is at the moment.
Thank you very much. So there you go. You've heard what all our candidates have to say on WASPI Women. Now, keep thinking about the questions that you have in relation to some that you've heard tonight. I'm going to come back to the audience again in a couple of minutes. But as I mentioned, we do have questions from the editor of our local print media, the Dunoon Observer, which we will put to our candidates throughout the night. And these are three or four varied questions for each member of each party. So it will just be the party themselves, the person that answers, not the rest of the candidates. Michael Kelly of Labour. Now, the situation in the Labour Party seems pretty confused. All right? So are you personally for or against the renewal of Trident?
I'm personally in favour of it. Let me explain a little. I actually voted as the representative for the Argyll and Bute CLP. I voted for getting rid of Trident. However, I've actually changed my mind, mainly because the fact is, we are committed as part of a membership of NATO to spending 2% of our GDP on weapons and defence. And as part of that, I view Trident as a perfectly worthwhile thing to spend. If we're spending money on guns, I'd rather they be weapons that are never going to be used, ever, rather than, weapons to go and fight, bombing third world countries, frankly. I mean, I understand there is an idea that Brendan brought up earlier about you take money from one and that takes money away from the other. And I think that's just frankly not true. There's we have 2 aircraft carriers that are not going to be used ever being built. There's plenty of other things that could be cut.
Thank you very much. So it's nice to hear his own personal point of view on this. Now, unfortunately, as I said, the other candidates don't get to answer these. These are questions for each independent candidate. Now, for Gary Mulvaney from the Conservative Party, the Conservative manifesto states that public consent is needed before Westminster will allow a second independence referendum in Scotland. Now, will a majority SNP MPs being returned to Westminster constitute public consent?
A simple answer to that is no. I mean, I think Theresa, well, you may not like the answer, but Theresa May has made it very, very clear, that now is not the time. And let's think about that sensibly. We're looking ahead to Brexit negotiations that will start in around about 20 days' time. Either led by Theresa May or, God help us, Jeremy Corbyn. We're looking to get the best deal possible. I remember back to 2014, once in a generation, and I think we ought to respect the will of the people. Let's, as Alan says, wait a generation and let's have let the people decide again.
There you go. I tell you what, you're getting good value for money tonight, aren't you? Now, unfortunately, these are not questions that I can open up to the audience. These are specifically for the newspaper, for use in the print edition this week. No, I'm afraid. Excuse me. One thing, we can't hear you first of all, okay? So wait until we can get a microphone to you. Please allow me to put the questions to the other 2 candidates first, and then I will come straight back to you. I promise you. Just please allow us to ask these questions first, and then we'll come straight back to you. Now the problem is about the audience. Sorry. Well, the problem was I couldn't hear you, unfortunately. So, ladies and gents, as we said at the start tonight, please be courteous to other members of the audience as well. No chit-chat, no booing, no murmuring, no moaning. If you can't hear us as well, sir, please let us know and we will turn it up. Okay, if you find the audience is too loud. Okay, well, as I said, we've had a complaint from the audience tonight, so please, if you could keep it at a low level. And then, Gordon, I wonder if we could maybe turn it up just a little as well. And when our candidates are talking, if you would please lean forward into the microphones more so we can hear you. Anyway, Gary, thank you very much for your answer. Moving on to Brendan. Now, Brendan, and this is a question, of course, from the Dunoon Observer newspaper. Nicola Sturgeon said she would form a progressive alliance in the event of a hung parliament. But the question is, who with?
Well, it certainly won't be the Tories. I think the clue in the question, that a progressive alliance that would not include the Conservative Party, not for a moment. We will work with anybody in order to put forward a progressive programme for government. Now, we're not interested in having, seats in the cabinet table or, being private parliamentary secretary to whoever. But what we are interested in doing is ending poverty, ending this appalling austerity agenda in which the poor are being forced to pay for the mismanagement of the banks. And I think that we will work with anybody to help form a government who will do that. Because, frankly, what we're seeing now is levels of poverty in the United Kingdom which have the likes of which haven't been seen for generations. And anything we can do to make that happen, we will make that happen. And that involves working with anybody and everyone who's not a Conservative.
Okay, so just for the Dunoon Observer newspaper, so I've got the answer to the question right. Anyone except the Conservatives, that's your answer.
That's my answer.
There
Absolutely.
we go. Okay, moving on to Alan Reid now for the LibDems. And again, I said these are questions from the editor of the Dunoon Observer newspaper. Now, the Liberal Democrats want to see a second Brexit referendum, but have dismissed a second Scottish independence referendum. Do the Liberal Democrats only want referenda on things that they actually agree with?
Well, there was a difference between the Scottish referendum and the Brexit referendum. Before the Scottish referendum, the Scottish Government produced a 600-page white paper explaining what they intended to do if there was a yes vote. We had a debate on that, and the outcome was that the people of Scotland rejected the SNP's proposal. In the case of the Brexit referendum, the Leave campaign produced no proposals, and if I quote Ruth Davidson on this, as she said about Boris Johnson and other Tory colleagues, they lied. And that's Ruth Davidson's words. So there was no proposal put forward by the Leave campaign as to what would actually happen. People in Britain voted to leave the EU. What they didn't vote for was the eventual outcome. So what I think we should do is that when there is an outcome to the negotiations, the Conservative proposal is that Theresa May will decide whether the outcome is a good deal or not. We think that it should be the British people. The British people voted to start the negotiation process. We think they should also get a vote at the end of the negotiation process.
Thank you very much. Those are a set of questions from the Dunoon Observer newspaper's editors, and if you're really unlucky, there might be another set of those before the end of tonight. Now, back to questions from the floor as well. I'm going to take some of those, but the gentleman with the piece of paper, is that... Do you want to give it over to me then? Because obviously one of the gentlemen over there can't hear what's been said tonight, so I better not annoy him anymore. So you're going to make it funnier, did you say? What? Sure, right. All right, see, so it's for one. Do you just want the one candidate's answer to this? To all of them, right? Just to sort of know, because it's addressed to someone. Mr. Reid, this is addressed to you. It says, I have received 5 LibDem leaflets by post. Only one mentioning yourselves and all the others, published and printed in England. Are you entirely without any policy except an attempt to argue against the democratic right of the people of Scotland to choose their own future? And there's 2 questions on this, 3 actually. Who is paying for this blatant attempt to avoid election expensive limits, and are you frightened of another referendum? Okay, I tell you what, I'm going to let the other candidates answer some of these as well, but on the subject of, obviously I think it's the leaflet being put through the door, printed in England, basically what he's saying is, why wouldn't you argue for the democratic right of the people of Scotland to choose their own future? Is that what you get? Right. So you say this is to do with the rules where it's printed and the so Alan, Alan, quite a lot in there, Alan. So could you answer that, especially on election expenses and where it's been printed, and is that part of it?
Well, the leaflets that feature myself are paid for by my election agent Andrew Nisbet, who lives in Helensburgh, and they will be declared in the election expenses return, because as Mr Hill knows, there is a limit on the amount of money that can be spent promoting a candidate. As to the other leaflets that promote Liberal Democrat policy, there is a national limit that all the parties have to cannot spend in excess of, and the leaflets that promote national Liberal Democrat policy, that's nationwide Liberal Democrat policy, are paid for by the Liberal Democrat Party. It's leaflets that are going out throughout the country, so they will have no doubt gone to tender and taken the cheapest offer to print them, which is, I think, what most organisations, when getting leaflets printed, would do. But Mr Hill can be assured that the leaflets that promote myself will be accounted for within the election expenses limit for Argyll and Bute, and the leaflets that promote the Liberal Democrat Party will be accounted for within the national expenses limit for the Liberal Democrats. Okay, thank you, Aldi. As I said, this question is from a guy called Dave McEwen Hill. There's several questions in amongst it as well, but the one you said I could address to all candidates is the bit at the bottom. Is that the bit you're referring to? So we'll go to Michael Kelly on this. Michael Kelly, this piece of paper I have probably says from Dave McEwen Hill for all the candidates. Are you frightened of another referendum for Scotland?
Yeah, I am actually. I remember the day leading up to the referendum, and frankly it was like looking into the abyss. I was really scared that we were going to actually do the unthinkable and do a huge amount of damage to our society and our economy. And as someone who, I'm originally from the Midlands. Yeah, a lot of the SNP members, yeah, you do scare me quite a lot. And a very personal kind of, I fear for my safety a bit.
Okay. Gary Mulvaney, are you frightened by another Scottish independence referendum?
I'm not frightened by many things, and a referendum led by the SNP is certainly not one of them. But the key thing is it the right thing to do? Is it the right thing to have another referendum just now? And I see all SNP supporters nodding away. I don't think it's the right thing to do. We had one in 2014. We're going to go into really, really difficult decisions led by either Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn in the next 3 weeks. They're going to determine, the future of the UK and our trading relationship with the European Union. That to me says it's not the time to do it, and I think Theresa May has been dead clear about that. Can I just pick up one point about the election material? I just wish that Alan actually used the current statistics for 2017 in terms of the council elections, not 2 years ago, because that would show that where we are, we're nip and tuck, Conservatives and SNP, in terms of this constituency.
Okay, thank you very much, Gary. I'll come to you now, Alan, anyway. Because that letter is addressed to you. First, I'll give you a right to reply as well.
Well, the last general election in this constituency 2 years ago, and we want to compare like with like general election with general election, showed that I was in clear second place with almost double the number of votes that the Conservative candidate got. To use a council election as a base for trying to predict a parliamentary election is ridiculous. I mean, for a start, different parties put up different numbers of candidates. There was one ward which was unopposed, so they obviously, their votes, they don't get a chance to vote. And also, most ridiculously of all, because of the large number of independent candidates, it's difficult to compare the results for the parties. I mean, if we were going to say that council elections predicted general elections, then because of the strong success of the independents in Argyll and Bute over many years, Dick Walsh would have been our MP for the last half century.
So let's again, let's get us back. This is about Westminster that we're talking about tonight, and not at the local level. But just on the other point that's on this, Alan Reid, yourself and the Liberal Democrats, I mean, are you frightened of another Scottish independence referendum? That's what the question asks.
Well, I'm not frightened of it because I'm be confident that the no vote would win yet again. I am extremely concerned because it would be extremely bad for business in Scotland, because all the uncertainty would mean a lack of investment. It would also be very bad for an awful lot of people's personal lives because of all the divisions that it would cause within families.
Okay, thank you very much. And this should be a short and sharp answer, although I've let all the other candidates answer. I will have to let Brendan answer on this one as well. Frightened of another independence referendum?
Not at all.
Be brief.
I would welcome it. I mean, I don't see how, as Democrats, we can claim to be frightened of the voice of the people. I don't see how democracy can frighten people who claim to be Democrats.
Okay, all right, just thought we'd ask.
Could I say one final sentence on the election leaflets? In keeping with my theme of my campaign about the economic regeneration of Argyll and Bute, all of my leaflets are being printed by printers within Argyll and Bute in order to keep the money in our local economy.
Okay. I will leave that there for the other candidates to have a look at their leisure. Back to questions from the floor rather than letters from the floor. I did promise this gentleman in the corner about 10-15 minutes ago that we'd come to him in the next round of questioning. Again, if it's for a specific candidate, please make that clear, but I will open it up to all the candidates as well. And please speak into the microphone so that your other colleagues can hear you as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask the panel, and in particular the Conservative MP, it's a two-pronged question. Number one, have I got to apologise for being old?
Okay.
Number two, there's a waft of pensioners out there throughout the United Kingdom who have been retired for the last 10 years, who have paid their taxes all their life, and are still paying taxes 10 years and 15 years after retirement. So the funding for the care for the elderly, do we have to apologise for asking for to be looked after at their old age?
Okay, so basically this question is about you've paid in all your life, you're still paying in, and you feel as if for some reason you feel bad about asking to get back what you've paid in. Right, okay. Just that kind of sums it up. Obviously, that was directed our Conservative candidate, Gary Mulvaney. Gary, he feels bad right now about things that are happening. What do you have to say to that gentleman?
Well, first of all, the answer to your direct question is no, you shouldn't have to apologise for being old. Everybody in society, whether they're old or young, has got a contribution to make, and your contribution, I can assure you, is as valuable as anybody else's in this room. In terms of the particular point, I do accept and I do agree that there's many more people working. They're working an awful lot longer now. Yes, they're still continuing to pay tax, and for those that aren't working, then yes, they are potentially paying tax on whatever income they've got coming in. I mean, I do think the government is trying to balance a whole series of things. Well, it depends on your income level. I mean, I would say that over the coalition government and the Conservative government, we have raised the personal allowance. The amount that you can now earn before you pay tax is an awful lot higher than what it was before. We have actually increased the level of the pension, and the triple lock is actually guaranteed until 2020, and then there's a double lock after that. So we are trying to do that. I mean, I would accept that if you look at where we are as a country, we are still spending an awful lot more than what we're earning. And we've done that for the last 10 or 12 years. And I do think, genuinely, we've tried to protect the elderly and tried to protect pensioners. There is an issue in terms of social care that was picked up by an earlier question. You know, and Theresa May did clarify what the policy is. That policy doesn't actually apply in Scotland. Scotland can actually have a different policy in terms of how they want to provide social care, and we have got a different policy here as well, and we may well choose to do something different and enhance it. You know, that will be up to the Scottish Parliament, that's not up to Westminster. But I do accept, you know, the tenor behind your question, that, you know, these are challenging times, and in a sense they need to be challenging times, not just for one generation, but in a sense across all generations. You know, and I think it's a very, very difficult balancing act that the government are trying to deal with.
Okay, just I would like to come back to you just a second, because you know, in Argyll and Bute we do have an ageing population. Please don't take that the wrong way, anyone. And I'm sure this question that you've asked tonight, quite a lot of people were thinking as well. Does that answer the question? Again, put the microphone up to your mouth so that we can hear you.
The only part that answers the question, because it's hiding behind a lot of things. It's trying to divide us between England and Scotland. This question applies to everybody in the United Kingdom with regards to care for the elderly. And when I say thousands, I mean thousands of people who are retired for 10 years and 15 years are paying quite a percentage of their pension yet, and above what they've paid throughout their lives. And what's coming over on that television every day is, well, you know, in the year 2000 we'll have another 2 million old age pensioners. You know, it's utterly ridiculous.
Okay. So Michael Kelly of the Labour Party, you've heard what a gentleman has to say, and it's probably reflected by quite a few people that are in this audience tonight. Disheartened, served his country, paid his taxes, now been told that he's the problem. What's Labour going to do differently?
Well, we're going to maintain the triple lock pensions beyond 2020 as well, frankly. I mean, these are the problem, I think, with the way that Gary's speaking about it, is that we're thinking about this as costs that maybe we can negotiate here, and I frankly don't think that's true. Pensions need to be paid at a certain level. We can't be negotiating and trying to bring these down. Care costs a set amount of money. I mean, this is another knock-on issue. That money has to be paid. Whatever else is happening with the economy, we can't be scrimping on this, and it doesn't work if we don't.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. It's a ticking time bomb, this. As I said, we are all living longer, etc. Can the SNP do anything, actually, to sort this out?
Well, I think the state pension is very much a reserved issue. And I can see why the gentleman asked the question. I think, you know, that he's being made to feel guilty for living longer. There has been an attack on pensioners. There's absolutely no doubt about it, whether it is through the abandonment of the triple lock, or, as we talked about earlier on, the WASPy woman. But I think what it underlines is that at the start of this campaign, I think Theresa May was so confident. She was so absolutely cocksure of her position that she could believe she could do whatever she wanted to do and she would get away with it. And I think what you've seen, an example of grey power, brought about an embarrassing, screeching U-turn. Now, Gary described it as a clarification of the policy. It wasn't a clarification of the policy, it was a U-turn. It was realising that they'd stepped too far, they'd become too arrogant, and their hubris had caught up with them, and they were forced into, as I say, this embarrassing U-turn. So, to all us greys out there, keep up the good work, because we've finally got them on the run.
Okay. And finally, Alan Reid of the Liberal Democrats, you've always thought slightly differently. Can you sort this out if you get into power or into coalition? Is this something you're going to campaign for and sort out and help this gentleman and others that are in this audience tonight?
Well, I mean, pensioners have nothing to apologise for. During their working lives, they paid their taxes, they paid national insurance, and when they're retired, many are paying income tax, and they're all paying VAT of some sort or another. So pensioners have nothing to apologise for. Personal care for the elderly is, of course, free in Scotland, and it's free thanks to the Liberal Democrats. It was the Labour Liberal Democrat coalition that brought in free personal care for the elderly, and it was the Liberal Democrats that brought free personal care for the elderly into that coalition agreement against the wish of the Labour Party. The Liberal Democrats in the coalition government at Westminster introduced the triple lock guarantee. I'm very saddened that now that the Conservatives form a government on their own, they're going to remove that triple lock guarantee after 2020. As far as the Liberal Democrats are concerned, the triple lock is a guarantee, full stop.
Okay, thank you very much. Now let's take some more questions from the floor. If you've got some with a bit of variety in there as well, pertaining to Westminster, that would be great. There's been I assume it's a gentleman because I can't see, but there's been someone waving a walking stick for a couple of minutes. So if that's you, sir, and you'd like to ask a question, then please do.
Yeah, I would like to ask a question for all of the parties up there. Normally, the UK government is elected by around less than 40% of those voting. Is that democracy? If proportional representation is good enough for Scotland, why isn't it good enough for the UK?
Okay. The audience members heard that fine. Did the panel hear that okay? You'll got that question? Yeah. Okay, let's start with Brendan O'Hara from the SNP.
I absolutely agree. And, you know, I could be accused of being a turkey voting for Christmas here, but I think that proportional representation, as we talked about earlier on about democracy, I think it is an essential part of democracy, proportional representation. And, you know, the SNP got 56 seats on 50% of the Scottish vote. We get 95% of the seats on 50% of the votes. Now, as a party, that's fantastic. As a Democrat, I think it's deeply questionable. And the SNP are absolutely committed to supporting not any form of proportional representation, but the right form of proportional representation within Westminster, regardless of what it does to our overall number of seats, because it's the right thing to do.
Thank you very much. Gary Mulvaney, the local elections, you guys did all right with the way the system is just now. How do you answer that question?
Well, I mean, I think it's horses for courses. You know, different elections, different bodies that you seek representation on have different solutions. I mean, I would point to the fact that back in 2011, we did actually have a referendum for Westminster elections to introduce proportional representation. It wasn't a particularly high turnout, which suggests, you know, voter interest per se, but the result was, you know, dead clear. You know, people did not want a PR for Westminster elections at that stage. And certainly, if you go round the doors today, it's certainly not a burning issue on most people's minds, I would have thought.
Thank you very much. Michael Kelly, the Labour Party, happy with the way it is? Like a change? Where do you stand on this?
Well, frankly, there are millions of things you could change with the British electoral system. I mean, that's why a part of our manifesto is that we want an actual general constitutional convention. I mean, I know that's not going to appeal to the SNP people who want independence. However, there are lots of election issues outside of just Scotland that need to be dealt with. I mean, we also have the unelected House of Lords, which is no one has been able to get rid of and is still a joke. You know, and there's issues to do with the way that boundaries are drawn up, allegations of gerrymandering and whether they're true or not. The fact is that people suspect there's gerrymandering is a bad sign in and of itself. So I think it's a part of a much bigger issue, you know. And then again, ultimately, we do have to get people involved with politics to actually vote through on a referendum to change the system. You know, he did make a fair point that, you know, if people don't vote for an alternative, then there's not a great deal we can do.
So you're firmly on the side of change then? Yes.
Yes.
And Alan Reid, as far as the LibDems are concerned, you want to stay the way it is, or would you like a change as well?
Oh, I definitely agree with the questioner. We need to change the system to proportional representation. As the questioner said, governments get elected with less than 40% of the vote. In fact, the last Labour government was elected in 2005 with only 35% of the vote. And that didn't give us strong government. It turned out to be a complete disaster of a government. And I mean, Gary is wrong to say that there was a referendum on proportional representation. AV is not a proportional system. So the British people have never been given the opportunity to decide whether or not they want to change the system for electing MPs to proportional representation. I hope they will be given the chance to vote on that.
So it looks as if everyone wants to change. Okay, now, before we move on, we've still got some more questions to try and get in from the Dunoon Observer newspaper, but can I just see, from a show of hands, who would still like to put a question tonight so I can decide what I need to... Oh, right, quite a few. Now, do we have any younger people here today in the audience as well that would like to put a question? Because I know it's a bit subjective as to what age you actually are, but...
You're a brave man.
Do we have any of these people who may vote for the first time, who were, felt strongly and registered online and voted to vote just the other week there when, there was this surge? I can see a couple of young members in the audience, and you're the one that's got your hand up the whole time. So I just thought, we've heard from most people to get a proper spread of questions tonight. If you'd like to tell us what your question is, and if it's for anyone in particular.
It's for all the candidates about what their opinion is on the disgraceful policy, which is the rape clause.
Okay, could just ask as well, what age are you?
19.
19, okay. And you've registered to vote for this year? Good, excellent. Okay, so the rape clause. Now, this is obviously a very, very difficult one. And I'll come to Gary Mulvaney from the Conservative Party first, as Ruth Davison defends some of these harsh Conservative policies, such as the rape clause. But that's Ruth Davison's opinion. What's yours?
I think, let's put it in context. That policy of the rape clause, as you've described it, has come from the changes to child tax credits, which effectively limit it to two children. And I think, when you look at the balance that I spoke about earlier, there's got to be a balance struck between a growing welfare bill and actually who actually benefits. So the policy was set at 2 children. And what was attempted, the so-called rape clause, was to effectively, if a mother had a child through rape, that they would be exempt from that, and a third or a fourth of a subsequent child would actually get the benefit. So the policy was born from a good intent, and the problem is that you may well disagree with limit it to 2 children. I agree that it should be 2 children. I think there's too many cases where we've got benefits burgeoning for much greater than that. So I think it should be 2. The question is then, should there be exemptions? And as soon as you say there should be exemptions, exactly how do you actually bring in those exemptions fairly? And what I understand from the policy is that if a woman is in that position, and effectively she will be entitled to that exemption, if she discloses to her GP or her social worker, that will be sufficient. That's the policy. If she discloses to her social worker or GP, they will fill in the form, and that will allow her to get the extra benefit. Well, that's the form. That's exactly what the policy is there to do. But I suppose the other part of the answer is that the Scottish Government do have the power to legislate in this area. So they can actually go in and change that. They can actually take away that clause. But of course they're not doing that. They would rather just go on and on about this. So they do have the power. They do have the power to change it. They brought forward no policy to change it so far. Maybe we'll hear from Brenda tonight that they're actually going to bring forward additional policies to mitigate the effects of the 2-child policy. But, we'll wait in here.
Okay, it's a very difficult question to answer, and I know I'll maybe give you a right to ask again. There's Brendan, you obviously the SNP got mentioned there.
Yeah, absolutely.
In response to what Gary said, and also in response to what our audience member asked.
And could I say, I don't think this is a difficult question at all. I think this is a very easy question, because this is foul. This is absolutely despicable. And I think, what have we become as a country that we are actually debating at a public hustings the rape clause? It defies belief that we are actually sitting around talking about that a woman, for a meagre benefit for a 3rd child, will have to fill in a form, relive the experience of her attack, name the child in the form. It beggars belief. It is wrong. There isn't a single mitigating factor within this, and to try and then turn the responsibility on the Scottish Government is bewildering. I think I think it shows the Conservative Party are sinking without trace, and I hope that this is written on their headstone when they do. It's a despicable policy. They should be thoroughly. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. If you let me finish, I will tell you what I'm going to do about it. I will do what I did in the last Parliament. Unlike the Labour Party, nothing. I voted against it at every turn. The SNP spoke out against it at every turn, and the SNP has led the campaign against this foul and despicable piece of legislation. It is not the responsibility of the Scottish Government to mitigate every foul and despicable piece of legislation that comes out of Westminster. And that's what this is. It is fundamentally wrong. It is bordering on the barbaric, and it shames every single one of them.
Right, Brendan for SNP. Gary and Brendan, Conservative and SNP. Let's move on to LibDems. This is an emotive subject, Alan Reid.
Yes, it's a very emotive subject because it's a despicable policy. I mean, the rape clause is only one of the despicable aspects of the policy. I mean, effectively what the policy does is say that if you're a child in a family of more than two, then you get less income than if you were a child in a family of two. That children who are in families of three or more should be valued just as equally as children in families of one or two. So I hope that the Tories will reconsider this policy. But I have to agree with Gary in one respect, and that is that the Scottish Parliament does have the powers.
That is appalling, Alan.
Brendan, it does have the powers to act differently, and could pay child benefit to third, fourth, and so on children if it so chose. And whereas I would agree that the primary responsibility here rests with the Tory government at Westminster, the Scottish government does have powers, and I wish they would use them.
Well, again, please bear in mind this is the Westminster elections we're dealing with tonight. Now, Michael Kelly from Labour, I've come to you last. It's going to be difficult for you to actually add anything.
I need to come up with another word for monstrous. That hasn't been used yet. I mean, frankly, it's a gross intervention in women's bodily autonomy, and it must not be allowed. Further, I think it is, frankly, I suspect it is a beginning of a slippery slope towards more interventions on abortions and policy like that, and I find them despicable.
Okay, thank you, Michael Kelly, the Labour Party. I was going to come back to you, but I think this could go on all night if we do. It's quite a heated question. So you put your hand in the air. I'm only going to manage to take possibly another one, maybe two questions. Now, if it's something we haven't covered tonight, could you please put your hand in the air so that I know? And remember, it must pertain to Westminster. I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to the gentleman over there at the very back just now.
This is mainly for Mr. O'Hara. Nicola Sturgeon has said, and the SNP government for the last, well, at least for the last year or so, Nicola Sturgeon has said she will never work with Jeremy Corbyn. She doesn't like him. So if she is now saying, as last night on the Alec Nee show, that she would back Labour should it be a hung parliament, does that mean if we vote SNP we're also voting Labour?
Well, what you're doing is you're voting to get rid of the Tories, because we will never support a Tory government. We will not do as the Liberal Democrats did in 2010, say that they wouldn't support a Tory government, then at the first whiff of a ministerial limo, so suddenly propping up a Tory government. That will not happen with the SNP. We do not do deals with the Tories, and we most certainly will not prop up a Tory government at Westminster. You can take that one to the bank.
Okay, so I think we almost touched on that question a bit earlier on as well, and I don't think I really need to give the other candidates a chance to answer that, unless you feel strongly that you must answer. But if you go on it, gentlemen, then keep it brief, because we have covered this question earlier. Yes.
Well, just to correct Brendan in one aspect, I mean, whereas in the 2017 election we've said we will not form a coalition with either Labour or Tory, we never said that in the run-up to the 2010 election. In that election we said that we would be willing to negotiate a coalition agreement with either of those two parties, depending on which one had the most seats, and that turned out to be the Conservatives.
Okay, this is kind of going over ground a little bit, but Gary, I know from the Conservative Party you want to say something as well.
Very, very quickly, I think we heard earlier on from Brendan about a progressive alliance, and that alliance would be Jeremy Corbyn with his hand up behind his back, persuaded to give a second referendum. That would be the price of a hung parliament with Labour.
Michael Kelly from the Labour Party, would that be the price?
It probably would be, and that's why it's not going to happen.
Okay, as he said all night long tonight. Now, there was a lady with her hand up towards the end of the... Yes, the lady on the end. If we could quickly get a microphone to her, please. If you'd like to stand up so that they can see you. So it's very difficult to see in amongst the crowd tonight. Again, if you could keep the question brief and tell us who it's for.
It's for all candidates. As a local authority, Argyll and Bute is rich in renewable resources. How would you fight for Argyll and Bute for renewable subsidies to be reintroduced by Westminster to support local communities to actually be involved in providing energy for the national grid?
Okay, is this to do with national? Okay. So, from a national level, Gary Mulvaney of the Conservative Party, national level supporting stuff here at grassroots in Argyll and Bute, you know about that. Tell us.
Well, I mean, I think you're maybe referring to the feed-in tariff, potentially. But, I mean, I think we've got to get a balanced energy policy across the UK. And I think one of the good bits of news we heard last week was that for the first time ever, we had solar energy generating much more than what we'd had in the past. Argyll is very, very rich in terms of potential for renewables. But I must admit, I do think we've come to the point where we maybe need to say no more wind farms on land. You know, if we're looking at renewables, I think we need to look at probably wave power or tidal power. I just think we've probably got to the point when you look across Scotland, you know, our beautiful country, I think we've probably got to the point that we've got enough wind farms.
Okay, thank you very much. Michael Kelly of the Labour Party, you know, big national organisation supporting us here at a local level. The party is keen on nationalisation. But as far as green energy stuff is concerned, how's that going to work?
Well, that's a key part of the nationalisation policy because, frankly, the private sector, I don't think it's doing it quick enough, and I'm not sure it doesn't have the incentive to do so. So we need nationalisation and the use of the National Investment Bank to fund rapid move towards more green energy, and that will mean renewable energy here in Argyll and Bute.
Okay, thank you very much. And Alan Reid from the Liberal Democrats, what's your policy on this?
Well, we need more green energy, which is why the subsidies were introduced in the first place. When the coalition government was in power at Westminster, the Tories were wanting to do away with these subsidies then, and we stopped them doing it. Now that they're in government on their own, they are doing away with these subsidies, and that's bad for the environment. It's bad for a rural area like Argyll and Bute. I would certainly be making the case to whichever forms the next government that these renewable subsidies have to come back.
Okay, so you're going to bring them back, it's going to renew them. And Brendan O'Hara from the SNP, how do you answer that question?
I think what you're seeing is that this Conservative government are bad for Argyll and Bute, because Argyll and Bute, as you say, has an abundance of clean, renewable energy. And I was in the chamber when Amber Rudd, completely unannounced, stood up and announced that the subsidy for onshore wind was being abandoned. And the outpouring of cheering and whooping and hollering on the benches behind her was absolutely astonishing. Now, if they don't want it in Lincolnshire and they don't want it in Cambridgeshire, that's absolutely fine. But there cannot be a one-size-fits-all policy for the United Kingdom. You know, from Truro to Thurso, you know, they cannot have a blanket energy policy. It's one of the most important resources that we have in Argyll and Bute is our energy and our ability to turn that into power, that wind power or wave into electricity. And we are being stopped doing it. The onshore wind industry has almost collapsed. CS Wind, one of the biggest employers in McIntyre, almost went to the wall as a result of it. And it is absolutely wrong, and it's been done because it suited the NIMBYs in Lincolnshire and Cambridgeshire who didn't want it, and it also allowed them to invest and subsidise the nuclear industry to an eye-watering degree. So the Tories chose the nuclear industry ahead of the renewable energy industry, and it's bad for Scotland, and it is appallingly bad for Argyll and Bute.
Okay, thank you. Now, I just about have time, I think, for one last question from the audience. So please make it a good one, and it will have to be from a member of the public who doesn't get to ask these questions on a daily basis to people. And I know you got your hand up, Mike. So make it a good one. Please make it about something that we haven't had, and it's going to be hard to choose between any of you two. So I'm going to allow our man with the microphone just to make the choice as to which one it was. Michael, I do apologise on this occasion.
Why do the panel think that there has been such an alarming rise in the use of food banks?
So, food banks, not acceptable in 2017. Michael Kelly from Labour.
Where do you begin? I mean, the fact is we have an increase in, we have a downturn in the economy, cuts in welfare spending, and, jobs that we've been created are all the jobs like mine. I mean, I know plenty of people who have used the food banks. It's really that simple. It's like if you're not spending the money, then people are going to suffer, and then they have to make it up with food banks. And it is not acceptable, and we do need to sort that.
Alan Reid of the LibDems, as we said, it isn't acceptable in this day and age, and a large majority of the country, working people, are using food banks.
Yes, it's not acceptable. And I think the reason why this has arisen is that our economy has performed very poorly over recent years. Although there are a lot of people in work and unemployment rates are relatively low, so many of the jobs that are available are very low-paid jobs. Now, we have to boost our economy, and the Liberal Democrats have a policy of a massive investment in infrastructure which will create the jobs. That would be infrastructure such as an expansion of superfast broadband, improving transport links, and investment in renewable energy generation. These are the types of things that will make Argyll and Bute, for example, a much more attractive place for employers to come. So the answer is to grow the economy through a massive programme of investment.
Okay, thank you. That's all from the Lib Dems. Brendan O'Hara from the SNP. It's not something we should be proud of in Scotland, is it? Food banks in this day and age?
Absolutely not. It's something that wherever you are in the United Kingdom, we should be deeply, deeply ashamed of, because what this is state-created poverty. This is a political choice that has been made by the government to widen the holes in that social safety net. We all grew up knowing that there was a safety net, and in extremis, when we needed it, it would be there for us. This government have deliberately and with malice aforethought widened the holes in the mesh of that safety net. And we now have a situation where, 3/4 of the children who are living in poverty, officially living in poverty by the government's own statistics, live in a household where at least one adult is working full-time. It's an appalling statistic, and it's a statistic which should shame us all. I think that the scandal of 0 hours contracts, of a low-wage economy, and the government are abdicating their responsibility onto the charitable sector. And that's why we have this explosion in the use of food banks. I think the Trussell Trust alone, who I think provide about half of the emergency food parcels, have said that in the last 3 or 4 years they have experienced a 400% increase in the use of food banks. That in an economy which is the 6th biggest in the world, the 6th richest economy in the world, isn't an accident. It's there by design, and it's a deliberate consequence of this government's policy, and that's where you should be directing your anger and your ire, the Conservative Party, because this is state-created poverty.
Okay. So, Alan Reid of the Lib Dems, it's a low wage. Michael Kelly, Labour, not acceptable, he says. State-created poverty from the SNP. Gary Mulvaney of the Conservative Party. Food banks, we've all seen them in Argyll and Bute. They do exist. What is your party's policy on this?
Yes, they do exist, and what we just heard from Brendan is a description of the problem, but no solutions. After 10 years in government, no solutions to these problems.
End austerity.
You can do something about it, Brendan. You choose to not to. You'd rather get your spin doctors attacking a nurse than you're actually better dealing with the problem itself. But the issue, if you look back at where we've been in the last 10 years, is we had a recession in 2008. A very, very difficult period where we saw businesses go to the wall. Thereafter, we've seen a period of where we've had to balance our expenditure, and we're still spending more than what we actually take in. So you've then got to strike a balance between those taxpayers that pay their taxes and those that are potentially on welfare that draw welfare benefits, and it's a difficult decision to draw. Should we be putting up welfare benefits? No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. So you then got to look, how do you actually get people out of poverty? And one of the ways you get people out of poverty is you get them into education. You get them into further education. But what's happened? The SNP have cut 152,000 college places. So the route out of poverty has been closed off by this SNP government. 10 years and they haven't achieved anything. 10 years they have not achieved anything at all. And you may not like it, madam, but that's the reality. 10 years of failure under this SNP government.
So there you go. Now, obviously, you've all got your own opinions on this tonight, and I must be honest with you, we can't get to every question that everybody has, and it's unfortunate that we can't, because these questions matter a whole lot to you, matter a whole lot to us and to everyone else. We've dropped a big pile of questions tonight from the Dunoon Observer newspaper just so we could squeeze in as many questions from you this evening. But I'm afraid, as always, we've run out of time. But I'll be honest with you, your questions tonight have been absolutely fantastic. And my apologies to those who never got to ask a question this evening. Now, after tonight's round of questions, you might still be unsure of who deserves your vote on the 8th of June out of our candidates tonight. So, to end this evening, and I know you've heard a lot from the candidates, and I know some of you have got questions that you want answered, but we simply can't answer every question that we have tonight, which is unfortunate. So to round off tonight, we're going to allow each of the candidates a further 2 minutes to appeal to you for your vote. So they might cover something that you haven't had an answer to tonight. And we'll start this evening with a man who says he's a shop worker. He's a guy and girls like me and you. He wants to make a difference to our community, and he's standing for Westminster, which they're all doing, and it should be applauded. So tonight, the final 2 minutes to start with, we'll give to Michael Kelly of the Labour Party. And Michael, no short, sharp answers. Use the whole 2 minutes. All right.
I know I have a really bad habit of doing that. Well, my vision for Argyll and Bute is one where, frankly, people can actually afford to live. Where people live in good houses, where people can heat those houses, where we have infrastructure that isn't crumbling to pieces, and where people work decent jobs at decent pay and with decent security. I mean, it is really a sad indictment that, a mere decent life for people is seen as a luxury that we as a nation can't afford. But with the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn as leader, we can achieve this. A society for the many and not the few. Sorry, it was a bit short.
That's okay. You've heard what he has to say. Spoken from the heart tonight. It's Michael Kelly from the Labour Party. So, final 2 minutes, Alan Reid of the LibDems.
I've been the Member of Parliament before. I know what the job involves. It involves both representing this constituency in Westminster and getting out and about in this constituency, talking to people, listening to your views and using the information gained to represent the constituency at Westminster and to improve life for people in Argyll and Bute. The Liberal Democrats want us to get on with the day job. Absolutely no second referendum on independence. Let's get on with improving our economy. The Liberal Democrats have a policy of a massive investment in infrastructure. That would be infrastructure such as completing the rollout of superfast broadband so that every house in the country has access to superfast broadband. That will bring jobs to Argyll and Bute. We want to roll out 4G mobile phone coverage throughout the whole of Argyll and Bute. That's important for bringing jobs. There's also the physical connectivity as well. improving our roads, improving our ferries, improving our housing. Because in order to attract young people to come to Argyll and Bute and young people to stay in Argyll and Bute, we need affordable housing as well as jobs. So that programme of investment in infrastructure will bring about great changes here in Argyll and Bute. It's a wonderful place to live, but let's boost our economy so that it's also a place where people can earn high wages. That's what the Liberal Democrats will concentrate on. Let's bring jobs and prosperity, and let's not be distracted by wasting 2 years on yet another independence referendum.
Brendan O'Hara from the SNP, your final 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for turning out this evening. I think it has been the busiest and most lively of all of the hustings that we've had. As I said right at the start, my priority has been the economic regeneration of Argyll and Bute through the vast improvement in physical and digital connectivity. That is the key to this constituency's future. If we don't have it, we will be caught in this ever fastening spiral of depopulation, and the money formula follows the population. So we have to break it, and we have to break it by making Argyll and Bute an attractive place for young people to come and live and work and raise a family. And we have got to stop our young people deciding there is a better future for them in Glasgow and Edinburgh and London. We've got to get them either to stay or come back. And I go back to what I said earlier on about the Faroe Islands, because they have proved you can do it. Their population has increased hugely over the last 15 years, and it has been increased because they have connected every house to 4G, and they have connected every one of the island communities to the centre. And it means that young people who went to Copenhagen for their university education are now coming back. And it's political choices. And I think that's what I have started, and that's what I want to continue doing. It is my number one priority. I think everyone else tonight, has made their priority stopping a second referendum. My priority will be to continue to work tirelessly for the people of Argyll and Bute in order to get that economic regeneration on which all of our futures and the futures of all of our children absolutely depend.
Okay. We've heard from Scottish Labour, we've heard from the Lib Dems, we've heard from the SNP. Our final candidate tonight in his final 2 minutes for the Scottish Unionist and Conservative Party, Gary Mulvaney.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. It's been a very passionate debate tonight, and I know I can see people in the audience who passionately disagree with me, but what I will give you as a guarantee, whether you agree with me or whether you disagree with me, as your MP, I will represent you to the best of my ability, because that is the role of your Member of Parliament. This is a very critical election we've got here. It's not just about electing your Member of Parliament and you've got the choice in front of you today. It's about making a decision about how you want your country to go. You know, and it's a choice between a Prime Minister of Theresa May or Jeremy Corbyn as your Prime Minister. And as I keep saying, 11 days after that, we go into the Brexit negotiations. And who do you want to be able to get the best deal for the country? Unlike the Liberal Democrats, I respect the will of the people. They decided they wanted to leave the European Union. We now need to go to the next step and get the best possible deal. And it's not the Conservatives or Theresa May that's made this whole debate about IndyRev 2. It's Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP, because they simply will not listen to the will of the people. When they say no, they meant no. No to a second referendum. So when you're going into that ballot box on the 8th of June, it is a big decision, it's a big choice. And I would hope that you would put a cross beside the Conservatives, because we can actually win in Argyll and Bute. Despite what Alan says about the council elections, they happened 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we came within a whisker of actually beating the SNP. So my final message is very, very clear. Unionists unite, because behind the Conservatives we can win, and we're the only ones to beat the SNP.
So, thanks tonight to all the candidates, some who have travelled far and wide in Argyll and Bute, because we're a big constituency, to be here tonight. You've heard what they all have to say, so now it's over to you to vote. The decision really is yours. Full reaction and analysis will be in this week's Dunoon Observer newspaper, and you can catch the hustings again on replay on democracylive.scot. Head home tonight, you can watch it again. My thanks to the Dunoon Observer for organising tonight's hustings, and to the Burgh Hall for letting us use this wonderfully newly refurbished facility. But most of all, thanks to you for attending tonight and putting our candidates through their paces. Now, I'll say this again, and I've said this before, unfortunately, due to the lack of female candidates, may the best man win on Thursday, the 8th of June. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
And ladies and gentlemen, thank you to the Chair, Derek McIntyre. You did an exceptionally good job tonight. Thank you very much for coming. Good night.